Pain plus reflection leads to progress. You have to make mistakes to grow. You never tell somebody they're good. You only reward effort. I want Joe Average to know what I know about Olympic athletes. Nothing will ever replace hard work. You gotta find what's the best training system for you.
I've just been challenged to run an Ironman on a 100% plant-based diet. Have you trained vegan athletes that...
No, impossible. People who choose veganism have lower IQs. People who go vegan lower their IQs.
Do you believe the assertions that the entire Russian team has been doping since the 60s?
Earlier, they're the first ones to use testosterone injections. The advantage is 10%. If you have 10% advantage but you train like a moron, it doesn't really give you an advantage. The universe gives to the giver and takes away from the taker. You could have good karma or bad karma. It's just a matter of choice.
They say that the human race is doomed, that we have lost touch with our true nature, that the media has corrupted us, and that the planet has no future. I disagree. I believe that humanity is full of hope, and that our salvation lies within each one of us. My name is Brian Rose, and my job is to listen, the oldest method of learning known to man. Each week I seek out individuals that are changing the world, people who are living and thinking in a different way. Their stories will challenge your beliefs, make you question your choices, and perhaps inspire you to change. I never planned on doing any of this, but now I can't stop. Join me on this mission and make humanity something we can all be proud of.
Charles Poliquin has trained over 800 Olympic athletes in 23 different sports. He's generally recognized as the greatest strength coach on the planet. Tim Ferriss even dedicated an entire chapter of tools and titans to this man. Charles is amazing. We talked about strength. We talked about how to train his Olympic athletes, about feeling their energy, even some Chinese yin and yang elements when it comes to training. And he also told me that he wasn't very impressed with vegans, which isn't great because I'm on my 100% plant-based diet on the road to my first Ironman, but that's okay, Charles. Everyone has their opinions. I know you're really gonna enjoy this show. And inside London Real Academy, you're gonna enjoy those things too. We're kicking off with the Business Accelerator. Soon to come up is our public speaking course, Speak to Inspire, and of course the Life Accelerator, and more about that inside.
London Real doesn't stop when the conversation ends. You see, that's when we get started. Because everything begins with a thought, and then comes the action. The London Real Academy is our global transformation platform. Here we bring together thousands of students from over 75 countries. Whether you want to build a profitable business from your passion, or learn to speak to inspire, or broadcast yourself with your very own podcast, or accelerate your life to become a high-performance person, we have the online accountability course and personal mentoring program that will make your dream a reality. Join us, and we'll take your life to the next level, together. Our next accelerator course is starting soon.
This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is Charles Poliquin, the world-renowned strength coach who has trained over 800 Olympic athletes across 23 different events, as well as professionals in the NHL, NFL, NBA, and soccer. You've been teaching for over 40 years, and many consider you to be the most successful strength coach ever. You're an expert in muscle growth, strength, sports performance, and coined the phrase, the myth of discipline. You're the author of 14 books, have written over 2,000 articles, and are featured in an entire chapter of Tim Ferriss's New York Times bestseller, Tools of Titans. Charles, welcome to London Real.
Thank you very much for inviting me, Brian.
It's awesome to have you here. I'm curious, what goes through your mind when you're taking that plane and landing into Heathrow? You know, when you think of London, when you think of the UK, how do we compare when it comes to, you know, performance, physical performance, knowledge about strength, etc., as athletes?
Very poor. I mean, if you look at other countries, the biggest problem is lack of education. But in the last 12 years, Britain has caught up a lot, right? You can even tell by the choice in gym equipment, and that has changed dramatically in 12 years. The problem, I would say the biggest problem in the UK is mainstream media. So there's a lot of myths still perpetrated. And I would say second biggest issue with the British market is actually the medical doctors. I mean, I'm not trying to offend anybody, but the culture in the medical British establishment is we're second authority after God, right? So they have this attitude, well, it's not in the research. Well, maybe you didn't read the research. So once they finish school, so there's a lot of stuff that is dramatically stupid that is still being done, but the doctor says so. So sometimes when I work with British executives, say, my doctor told me this, and I go, no, that's not true. You know, we've known that for 60 years. So the British medical establishment, because of the socialized medicine, is limited. I think if they went more private, the quality would go up. And I think in the US, that's the biggest difference, is that it's a business, right? So then people have to compete to eat. Well, if you have a Canadian doctor, you get it paid even if you're the last guy in your class. And you're still called doctor, but you could have been the dumbest guy in your class, but you're still going to get work.
Okay, so Canada suffers from the same problem as
yes,
the UK.
so in Australia.
Okay,
Yes.
because it's a socialized system where it's not a meritocracy.
But, you know, yeah.
You mentioned butter and bread earlier, and it made me think of a saying that you say, which is, earn your carbs.
Yeah.
And I was wondering if you could explain that to people, because I think most people don't understand that concept, and they think they deserve their carbs.
Yeah, people have more excuses than a pregnant nun for eating carbs. Oh, my grandmother's Italian, or whatever bullshit they come up with, right? So basically, it's called the equator rule. So the closest your genetic background comes from the equator, the better you can do off carbs, right? Because the temperature is high, you don't need fats to survive this weather conditions and so on. But usually Caucasians, especially from the north, like Norwegians, don't have good capacity to metabolize carbohydrates. So now with genetic research, we found, for example, that there's genes that control starch digestion. And as of today, there's 6 copies of that gene. But people from Pakistan or Kashmir have all 6 copies. So they can eat a lot of carbohydrates and it doesn't bother them. It doesn't bother their blood sugar or whatever. But if you go to Estonia or Finland, they have 0 copies of the gene. But yet this Finnish government will say you need to eat 16 servings of breads a day. Right? So it doesn't work. So, and your upper back fat is probably your best indicator if you can tolerate carbs or not. I've been saying this since '82, and other researchers backed me up in 2007. But all little fat you have in the upper back determines if you can have carbohydrates. So Serbians, anybody from the Balkans, is actually, they're good for the Caucasians that metabolizing carbohydrates. So they could have 80% carbohydrates if they're clean carbohydrates. I'm not talking Twinkies or what do you call it, Java cakes in the UK.
Right.
If you have Java cakes as your source of carbohydrates versus celery, right, you're gonna get into trouble. But
so upper back fat, not abdominal fat, for the best reading.
Correct.
But seeing your abs was also one of your baseline rules.
Or having penis skin on your arms, just meaning you're healthy, right? Your
What does that mean?
Well, basically, if you look for survival, the least important hormone are the androgens, the sex drive hormones. So if your sex hormones are good, usually are lean in the biceps and the triceps. So, but the body doesn't really care. I mean, if you look at evolution, if you're having sex with your companion in a cave and there's a saber-toothed tiger coming in, you gotta say, fuck procreation, I'm gonna either flight or fight, right? So some people call it flight or fight, and more modern doctors say flight, fight, or fuck. So as far as importance of choice, there's a chemical called pregnenolone that we make in the body, and under stress, we're wired to make it into cortisol, which is a stress hormone. But that precursor is the same precursor to making testosterone. But because we have so much stress, actually 100 times more than our grandfathers, testosterone levels are decreasing and cortisol levels are going up. Like, people have a smartphone. So even 10 years ago, people don't expect you to call you back within 5 seconds. We get people that write to my website and they don't figure out time zones, and they'll complain that it's Saturday morning for us, that no one answered them. I said, well, maybe it's Sunday night for you in Australia, but we're not open. But that demand to respond, and people say, if I don't respond, I'm not competitive. So we have a lot more stress. I mean, when's the last time you got a handwritten letter in the mail?
Right, no.
But you get bills, right?
Yeah, but 30 seconds a day you could be trolled online,
Yeah.
right? And so our stress levels way up. And so you're saying we have more stress.
So because we have more stress, we make less testosterone, because the chemical which is responsible for reproduction is now going towards stress management, right? So the world average for testosterone has decreased 1% per year since 1950, as measured by the World Health Association. So we're looking at 68% less testosterone.
That's a lot.
It's a big drop, right?
And how does that play out?
Well, for example, there's more and more females born, right? So there's less and less males, because whether you give birth as a male, when you fertilize the female, if you have high testosterone, you're more likely to have male offspring.
Is that true? I had no idea.
Yes.
I've never seen
So that's why if you look at French Canadian or Irish Catholic families, have 16 kids, it's usually males at the beginning, and the daughters are born later. Okay.
I've never seen that.
Yeah,
research.
like in my family, we're 8 kids. The first 6 are males, the last 2 are the females. So with decreasing testosterone, you're more likely. So if you're past 40 and you fertilize a female, it's more likely going to be a girl. Okay.
I've never heard that. And so how does that play into carbohydrate metabolism? Is it all linked?
Okay, so it's all linked. So basically, if I don't use the precursor to make my male hormones, I'm making stress hormone. When you're stressed, have you ever seen somebody says, man, Brian, I was so stressed last night, all I could eat was broccoli sprouts, right? So if you're stressed, what are you going to reach for? A box of Pringles, some chocolate, whatever is your carbohydrate of choice. So stress, we figured out thousands of years ago that under stress, eating something sweet calms us down, because cortisol and insulin can't be in the blood at the same time because they have opposite effects, right? So if I'm stressed out and I go, I need to lower this, I know that if I choose a chocolate bar, I'm going to bring my cortisol faster than if I eat a ribeye. But you should eat a ribeye if you're stressed out, because then your blood sugar will be managed for long hours.
Okay.
So, and now with supermarkets and convenience stores and vending machines, we can have access to carbohydrates readily. If you're a caveman and you wanted carbohydrates that were fast, there was honey. So you have to find a beehive, and maybe there's no bees because you're all the way in northern Finland, right? So, and then also some genotypes are not suited for carbohydrates, which require more protein and fats, like say Inuits, right? Inuits, their diet is typically 70 to 85% saturated fats, but it's normal. There's no trees, there's no gardens, right? So you eat seal for lunch and walrus for breakfast or whatever. So those people, once you introduce white man's food, like the 2 white poisons, white sugar, white bread.
Are those white poisons?
Yeah, that's
that
what
we should all avoid?
Yeah, and then they become fat. So for example, the most studied population in the world for obesity is the Pima Indians of Arizona. And the genotype evolved on 800 calories a day. What is there to eat in the desert? Like lizards, cactus, some plants, but a bit of rabbits. But there's not, in Arizona, you don't see any bison, right? Or buffalo. It's too hot.
Yeah.
So they stay in Montana. So the genotype evolved over 800 calories. And when the Americans took over, they put them on reservations. But they said that they can't fend for themselves, so we'll give them food. And then what do they get? They get very low quality food. So Pima natives get arteriosclerosis signs as early as 4 years old. And they're the Americans who die the youngest. The life expectancy as a Pima Indian is age 38.
Okay, wow.
So there's a group of researchers from Laval University in Quebec that start to study them and say, okay, let's give them more like a native diet. And then they see their blood profiles change, and they could basically reverse the effects to some degree of having a white man's diet.
And what can we learn from that study?
Well, basically, you have to eat according to your genes. I'm not talking about Levi's, I'm talking about your genetic profile, right?
Okay.
So, you know, and I say this all the time, and known for it, is the first thing you put in your mouth in the morning, provided it's food, will determine all the neurotransmitters for the whole day. Right? And now, in clinical psychology, they figured out that the two most important things to regulate neurotransmitters is a high protein and fat breakfast and waking up at the same time every day. What's an habit we have in Western? You work Monday to Friday, you rest out. Oh, I'm going to pay my sleep debt on the weekend. So people wake up at 6 to go to work, but they wake up at 11 Saturday, Sunday. Actually, that's one of the worst things you could do for aging rapidly. Okay. And
the second is what you put in your mouth when you wake up,
Yeah.
which the usual American puts in Cocoa Puffs.
yeah, or nothing, right?
Okay.
And then they take the subway, they rush, and they say, oh, I'm going to stop at Starbucks, which is caffeine, which stimulates cortisol.
And sugar.
And then I'm going to have a healthy muffin. Fuck, there's no such thing as a healthy muffin, right? And then it's like honest lawyer or underbilling lawyer. It doesn't exist. So people eat shit, and then their blood sugar crashes because the blood sugar went too high and secrete too much insulin. And then, you know, they repeat the cycle of cortisol, insulin, seesaw, and then they get fat, and they wonder, you know, I ate well, I had a whole wheat sandwich for lunch, you know, it doesn't work like that.
And so your rule is, what, if you're not under 10% body fat, you don't need to have a carb?
As a male, no.
Okay, and
You
you
don't
said there's
deserve-
an ab test, which means if you can see your abs, and this means each one of your abs,
Yeah,
that's a rough test for
Yeah.
what, 9% body fat or something?
About 9.8. As soon as you can see all the rows, usually about 9.8.
All the rows this way,
Yeah.
not vertically.
No.
Okay, but
No.
if you can see the rows, you're at about 10%, and then you deserve some carbs.
Correct.
Okay.
So most people don't deserve carbohydrates, right? I mean, that's you know, this is more for somebody who wants to be healthy. You could have carbohydrates in your diet, but they have to be clean carbohydrates. And the best way to determine if it's a clean carbohydrate is to ask yourself, did a caveman have access to it? There's no such thing as a field of bagels or, you know, a tree that grows donuts. So you can't have that. So what I tell sports people is that if it doesn't fly, if it doesn't swim, if it doesn't run in the field, or if it's not green, don't eat it. Okay, until they get to the optimal body fat. That's the most simple way to explain nutrition. And then once they are lean, then they could add things like figs and dates and bananas. But until they're lean, I don't. You know, I've got a reputation in the industry to get people lean very fast, but that's the way I do it. You know,
No
usually
fruits in there.
until they deserve them.
Right.
Right.
Okay. And they get some carbs from the green vegetables.
Yeah, some, but about maybe 50 or less a day, right?
Right, okay.
But there's some genotypes, according to Dr. Aronica from Stanford, that can only genetically tolerate 20 grams of carbohydrates a day,
Okay.
right? So there's a huge variance. But if you're from Croatia and you're fat because you ate too much pizza and whatever, I can keep high carbohydrate intake in your diet. It'll be better, you lose fat faster than actually if I put you on high protein, high fat diet, but they have to be really clean carbohydrates, right?
Okay.
So the thing in nutrition is that we tend to say there must be an optimal one-size-fits-all approach, and it doesn't. It has to be based on your genetics, right? So the more you eat closer to what your ancestors ate, the better it is.
And those 800 Olympians that you train, if you do reduce their carbs like that, I mean, there's a common myth that they need carbs for energy, and yet you're training them probably pretty hard.
Correct.
Do they need that?
No, not until they're sub-10.
Okay.
It's a myth, you know. But the one thing I do is I give them a lot of glutamine. And glutamine can restore glycogen stores. This is a sugar inside the muscle cells that is responsible for doing lactic acid training without raising your insulin. So I got a few tricks that I use. It's easier now to do it than a few years ago. I use ketones for the energy. exogenous ketones. But also I teach their body to become fat burning machine. And then, I started a long time ago to use fish oil, and I got criticized a lot. And then in 2007, skin research shows that I was right. I used to recommend 30 grams of fish oil a day, and on the internet I was getting blasted all the time. And Kenyan researchers showed the fastest way for an obese person to lose body fat is 60 grams of fish oil a day. But it's not a death sentence where you're going to take that for the rest of your life. As you get leaner, you can lower your fish oil intake. And also, if you take just fish oil for too long, you can become GLA deficient. But if you do the right blood work, I could decide, okay, now you should switch, right? But carnitine, amino acid, helps metabolize fish oil. It helps metabolize fat. And people don't eat meat anymore because they hear all this bullshit that meat's going to give you heart disease. So these are all contributing.
Which you don't buy.
Oh, fuck no.
Okay.
But the problem is, or colon cancer, right? But it's shit meat that is bad for you, right? But if you buy organic meat, wild meat, personally, when I'm back in Colorado, I only eat yak, I eat buffalo, I eat elk, and I can tell by my blood profiles that it gets much better. So that's why I used to complain when I came to the UK, where do I? And the guy said, you can buy wildebeest here, and you could buy this there, and then I was able to source the right stuff, right?
Okay, so wild meats is what you do.
Yes.
Have you trained vegan athletes that you think can perform on that diet if they eat correctly or not? Come on, Charles, give it to me straight.
Okay. No, impossible. You don't see a power athlete ever that's been vegan.
I mean, there's a new movie out called The Game Changers, right? And it's got like a power lifter and a runner and MMA athlete. And
you look at your British boxer who turned vegan, he tore his calf while giving a punch.
David Hay. Well, that could be a one-off, but
no. But what happens is that
you can actually get enough grams of protein via plant sources.
Yeah, but there's shit quality protein, in my opinion. I mean, if you're a stockbroker, maybe you could be a vegan. Okay,
what about an endurance athlete like Rich Roll, who does ultra marathons and stuff, who's on a complete plant-based diet?
Again, there's different distribution in the population. So, my friend Mike Maller is a vegan, and he's a strength guy, but he's an oddity, right? So there's different genotypes that could do better on it. But I find that a lot of people turn vegan because they have low stomach acid. And of course, if you have low stomach acid, meat is hard to digest, and it actually tastes horrendous. So if you put a vegan on betaine HCl, which is a source of hydrochloric acid, they can start digesting their vegan food better. And then I say, okay, let's try this. With vegans, what I recommend they do is the least threatening protein to them is actually scallops. So I don't start them with a yak ribeye. And then
they can digest it, which means it tastes better for them as well.
Yeah, but after a few weeks of amino acid therapy. And also I give them the amino acids they can't find in meat. But there's 2 German studies that have shown that people who choose veganism have lower IQs. And yes, it's true. And then the other thing is the people who go vegan lower their IQs. So humans are not, a very large percentage of humans are not made to be vegans.
Okay. And they'll of course come back and say that our intestines are 12 times as long as our body, and we don't have claws, and we don't have fangs, so we're not supposed to be meat eaters.
We only have one stomach, okay? Like all carnivores.
Okay. So obviously, I've been hanging out with a lot of vegans.
Yeah. But I think it's complete bullshit, really.
Okay.
I've never coached one of my Olympic athletes that was a vegan. I've seen people go vegan and get kicked out of the national team because of a lack of performance. For example, we had this skier in Canada, we thought like she was going to be the next superstar, right? And then she went vegan, and then she kept getting injured, and she would never recover from injuries. Because if you have a soft tissue injury, what do you need most? Carnosine, carnitine, and taurine. And you can only find those amino acids in animal sources, in quantities that are large enough, right?
Okay.
So, I've seen some vegetarians do well in endurance sports, but they still eat eggs and dairy product.
And it's more of an endurance sport where it's a lower body mass and a leaner profile.
Yes, a light body weight. But I've never seen like a gymnast or a speed skater or anybody that needs some power to to make it as a vegan.
Okay.
Right?
So I was in New York last week, and I've just been challenged to run an Ironman in 90 days on a 100% plant-based diet.
Yeah.
And I'm 8 days in. So I want to get your advice later.
Yeah.
But just so you know, that's kind of happening in the background. And so I've had a lot of plant-based people on the show, but Dr. Michael Greger, which is interesting because Dr. Michael Greger says what you eat can have dramatic effects on your life and your longevity, which I think you would agree with him.
100%.
And whereas almost 100% of the medical association doesn't even consider, which is of course insane. And I've had all these people on, and now I'm going to try it myself. So look, I'm 7 days in. My grandpa was a cattle rancher in Arizona, just outside of Phoenix. So I grew up on beef, and I've been eating sensible animal-based proteins the last few months. I mean, most of my life, but I'll let you know what happens.
All right.
And this is an endurance sport too.
Yeah.
But still.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, do you have any advice for me for the next 90 days on what
Well, let's see if you're going to do it. Okay.
I'm going to do it.
I would say take 6 grams of carnosine a day, 6 grams of taurine a day, and 6 grams of carnitine a day.
Okay. For muscle repair.
Muscle repair, more also for soft tissue health, because if you're going to run an endurance event, you're going to stress out your soft tissue drastically. I would also start do an HCl test, which for your audience, you could just put HCl in the search engine of my website, strengthsensei.com, and there will be how to do the test at home. Okay, and then thing is, the odds that you're HCl deficient is about 98%. So just doing that with a plant-based protein, you have an advantage over, let's say if you had a twin brother that want to run the race and he's not taking HCl, you already had an advantage over him, assuming you're identical twins and same willpower, blah, blah, blah. Okay.
So it's worth testing even though it's a very small percentage.
Yeah, but probably the best medical doctor on muscle and performance and aging is Dr. Gabrielle Lyon out of New York. And I had her lecture for my students, but she showed a lot of data, and then she showed, for example, blood work from vegans, and it's like horrendous. They're aging prematurely. So that's why I'm not so keen on. And then she's an MD, and that's all she does. She treats people, and the thing is, in her career, she studied under the greatest muscle protein synthesis expert. So she has a bias towards protein, but she says that. Let's say you got carnivores, vegetarians, and vegans, and he says the health goes down. Okay, there's famous vegetarian runners that died of heart attacks. The people say, "Well, how did that happen?" Right? So I think that if you do close monitoring of your nutrient status, that's a safe way to do it.
Of my what status?
Of your mineral status, for example.
And I do that via hair test? Or?
No, that's not really valid. The best way, there's 2 simple, very easy tests to get done. Unfortunately, UK, you'll have to go private. But there's a place in Mayfair that does it. You test for red blood cell magnesium and red blood cell zinc. And again, those values are on my website, which ones you should have. But for example, if your zinc level is really low, it's extremely hard to maintain your immune system. It's also really hard to make testosterone, et cetera, et cetera. So for example, fertility rates are directly related to zinc stores. So when people test zinc and magnesium in the UK, they look for serum magnesium or zinc, but those values are only going to be dangerously low when you're going to die in about 2 hours from now. So a lot of people never get diagnosed with it. So people have come up with a test where it's called red blood cell magnesium test, red blood cell zinc. So that's where the minerals are stored in the body, in the red blood cells.
Okay, so I should be testing on this regularly, every few weeks.
I would say test.
Only have 3 months.
Test tomorrow.
Okay.
You could email me your results and I could tell you how often you need to test, right? It depends how bad you are. But by experience, 98% of the time, if you have a deficiency, testing every 4 weeks is plenty, if you do what I tell you to do.
Okay.
Right? But it is important. And zinc is involved in 88 chemical reactions in the body. Magnesium is over 300 chemical reactions in the body. And one of the things you need to do when you run marathons is to have a good Krebs cycle. And a lot of these enzymes limit your Krebs cycle, your ability to burn fat while you exercise.
Okay.
So that's why I would monitor that.
Okay. Any other advice for me? Because I've basically taken this challenge, so I'm going plant-based for 90 days. I'm swimming, I'm biking, I'm running a lot, as you can imagine, to train for this. I mean, I know I'm not, I know there's probably hours we could talk, but besides what you just told me, anything to think about when it comes to the training and the recovery?
One thing I would look at, so with your sport, you need to actually intake a lot of carbohydrates. Carbohydrates while you exercise.
I don't have to earn them. Well, maybe I'm pretty low body fat. So
you're low body fat, so and you're doing all that mileage, right? But if you don't restore your glycogen stores, you'll have a problem. But if you look at the research, you can train somebody for Ironman using protein and fats only. Okay, it's feasible. Dominic D'Agostino is probably the best experts in the world now. But so you're going plant-based. So what I would use is rice-based carbohydrate powders. One of the things I would use is a chemical called oligodextrin. It's natural. It's basically a rice carbohydrate. And I would make a 7% solution that I would drink while I compete and while I train. So 7% is the ideal number, because if you use a great, it's not in one of those cases, more is better, because if you use more, then your body has to bring it back down to 7% anyway. So it's going to steal water from other parts of your body. So what you drink while you exercise can make a huge difference.
Okay.
Post-exercise, re-establishing carbohydrates. Because if you don't have enough carbohydrates, it's going to be hard when you get to that phase of training, when you do a lot of interval training. If you're doing really long, slow distance, it won't really matter. You could live off your fat. That's not an issue. But depending on, basically, the intensity of your training, so how fast you're running, will be limited by carbohydrate intake after a certain point. And again, I've got colleagues that will say, no, you could do it. But I'm answering because you're doing plant-based. But if you came to my office, that's not what I would tell you to do.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm taking this challenge on to learn a bit about myself.
Yeah,
So.
yeah. I mean, it's a great thing. I mean, we learn best through experience, right? I mean, you look at the shooting in Florida. These guys are supposedly trained, but under stress, they choked, right? Because they were not exposed. They may have learned to shoot at the shooting range, but they didn't learn to shoot under stress.
Yeah.
So it's all about what sort of training you receive, but you look at the best people who have accomplished the most, usually because of failures, right? I mean, it forces you to reevaluate. Pain plus reflection leads to progress. So I'm sure it's going to be a painful experience, but you're going to learn a lot about it.
I appreciate your insights, Charles. Walk me through this concept of the myth of discipline.
Yeah.
Because when I first heard it, it stood out to me, and it sounds like you're all about breaking down misconceptions. It seems like that's what your life's work is all about.
Basically, yeah.
When it comes to nutrition and strength training and this, what does that statement mean?
Well, the way we talk, for example, influences our behaviors, and our behaviors dictate our personality. People think that personality dictates behavior, but it's the opposite. And one of the things is that how you're successful in life is a function of what your subconscious mind allows you to become. That's why some people go on fat loss things and they never lose fat, and some people go on the fat loss thing and they're successful. It's always based on the subconscious mind. But the way to turn off your subconscious mind is habits, which the conscious mind has. So, for example, if somebody says, I'm going to stop eating sugar, a person could say, I can't eat sugar. So that's a victim, like, I can't eat sugar. Or you could say, I don't eat sugar, which is assertive, right? So the way we speak has a lot of influence on the way we think, and the way we think influences our behavior, which influences our personality. So the point of the myth of discipline is that it's what you love the most that dictates what you're going to choose, right? So you could say, I love donuts, I'm going to keep eating them, and I'm going to be fat, but fuck, don't complain to me. Right? Or do you love having abs? Yes, I love having abs. Well, do things that show that you love your body. So if you, let's say, are overweight, obese, I mean, you're walking, you crack the pavement, and you're listening to the show, you say, okay, fuck, I'm going to get in shape. Just change the way you talk. I love being fit. If you keep repeating that 500 times a day, then you're going to make the right choices, right? But it's easier to have discipline if you make the right choice for breakfast. Okay, that's why I like to have people do the meat and nut breakfast. It changes your brain chemistry, because there's two chemicals that drive you. We call them in Chinese medicine the yang chemicals. This is dopamine and acetylcholine. And dopamine depends on tyrosine, which is an amino acid you find a lot in meat and eggs for drive. But you need to pay attention. That's acetylcholine, right? And that way you'll find most nuts have a high source of choline. So back in '82, I said probably the best way to eat is having meat and nuts. But it took till, I think, 2006 before the research backed me up.
Okay, so you've always said have meat and nuts first thing in the morning.
Since '82.
Okay, because it gives you the chemicals and triggers the rest of the day.
But if you look at the research, there's very good research out of Harvard and the University of Toronto, where they feed kids different types of breakfasts, and they look at what food they select throughout the day. And if you have a good breakfast versus, let's say, oatmeal versus microwave oatmeal, the kids who had high protein breakfast made good food selection the whole day. So it affects your power the whole day. But kids
is that correlation or causation? Or
causation in this case, yes.
Okay.
And then it's been verified, like there's a Toronto study where they eat only nuts for breakfast, or only muffins, or half nuts, half muffin. And basically cognitive ability is greatest in people who eat nuts, a bit better in a nuts and muffin, but terrible in the muffin group.
Okay.
There's studies where they gave kids waffles for breakfast with that fake syrup. French Canadians call that telephone post syrup, because it's not maple syrup, right? And then the kids' IQ compared to the day before was 20% lower, right? So they appeared dumber from bad food choices. So, probably one of the quickest ways to turn around a country would have to have the breakfast at school, and then it's a good breakfast, right?
Right.
And the kids were more carbohydrate tolerant. You could give them oatmeal. If I was emperor of all galaxies, which is one of my goals in life.
You would ban oatmeal.
No, I would ban cereal, like boxed cereal.
Yeah,
rats would eat the box instead of eating the cereal because there's more nutrition in it. So the important thing is that with the myth of discipline is that you have to look at what do you love. Like if your child is in danger, you love your child, you'll do anything, even if you're not capable to do it. You may jump in front of a terrorist bullet because you say, I'll take the bullet for my child. So that's love. You don't need discipline for that, right? So if you approach the world as that, I love doing this, there's things like people say, you got to live your passion. That's bullshit. You have to take a skill, get really, really good at it, right? And then your passion will come out, right? There's a very good book called Be So Good They Can't Ignore You.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that if people read that, they understand. That's when the 10,000 hours thing came out. If you want to be good at something, you got to devote at least 10,000 hours to it. So
which is discipline, but that's love.
You love what you do, right? You say, okay. For example, people ask me, how did you start as a strength coach? Well, I started as a strength coach because I was raised French Canadian Catholic, so I would go to church at 10 o'clock and at the hots for this girl, Lucie Lemieux, and I would go to church as a perv at her. And then
How old were you? I
was like 14.
Okay. All right.
And then when I was, Monday, she wasn't there. I said, where were you? You went to church yesterday? It's the girl that everybody fantasized about in class. And then she says, well, I turned 14 this weekend, and my mom says, it's my free choice whether I want to go to church and I don't want to go anymore. So I said, well, if her mom thinks she can do it, then I can do it. So I had to lie to my parents. So I said, what am I going to do for that 40 minutes I'm supposed to be in church? And luckily, the university library was right beside the church. So I'd say, okay, I'd go to the library, and at 10:40, I'd walk home, and I'd grab one of the pamphlets from the church from the sermon. So I had a proof that I went to church. My parents never questioned me, and when I was 16, 17, they said, you don't have to go anymore. But what happened is that I first went to the periodicals section.
That's where you first went. Of course, that's where Charles goes. Didn't you go to the fiction section?
Yeah, no, so I went to the periodicals, and then I stumbled upon a Belgian kinesiology periodical. It was an article on arthritis in the knee. I said, that's interesting, so I read that. And then that started weight training, so I said, You know, back then there was no computer, so you had to go through the cards, and I found out that it was on the 6th floor where the weight training stuff, but I didn't speak English, so there was only about like 5 books on weight training from French authors. And I said, okay, there's only English stuff, so I got to learn English. I had to learn English, because what happened when I was a kid, from 68 to 70, we lived in France, and I missed basic English, and when I returned to Canada, I was put with the basically mentally deficient for learning English, so my English skills were really poor.
And when you were 14, were you interested in strength training?
Oh yeah, that's
okay.
true. So,
well, and was it always something of interest? Because
no.
young men are usually somewhat interested, but some are more than others.
I'll get to that, but what happened is that I pull out the English dictionary, and I remember distinctly, this helps with the bicep peak. And I said, peak, what's a peak? And I remember looking in the French English dictionary, it's the summit of a mountain. And it must mean the height of the bicep. You know, that's how basic my English was, right? Wow. But what got me into weight training is, even as a kid, I was disciplined. I was disciplined because I loved what I did. So I did karate. And we had this Irish guy who did weight training. And in 1975, to lift weights, you were a weirdo, like for most people. And I said, why do you lift weights? He goes, well, Bruce Lee does it. It improves his punching power. I was like, my dad told me it makes you slow and dumb, basically. And then we had a black belt convention. I was a black belt. And our master from our style came from Japan, and he weighed 265, 6'3", which is odd for a Japanese guy in the 70s. And my sensei was 5'4", 185, but he could bench press 400 pounds. And the Japanese guy says, like, you gaijins are shit, you don't know karate. Who's the toughest guy here? We'll have a fight. And my sensei, said, I'll go. And then the referee says, Jimmy. And when the me sound came out, my sensei knocked him out.
Was it Kyokushin karate or what? Full contact?
Ryu. Just knocked him out.
In the face?
Right in the face.
Straight out. No headgear.
No headgear.
No gloves.
No, that was for wussies, right?
Gloves?
No gloves.
Oh,
like just fucking reverse punch to the face. Japanese guys are knocked out. There's 200 black belts in the room. We're like, well, I guess we're not going to learn much. So somebody revived them, and when the Japanese guy woke up, all of us were gone. So a few weeks later, we had a blizzard. And I remember watching TV, and they said, buses won't run. There's going to be so much snow. And for buses not to run in Canada, it's a lot of snow, right? Because they're used to that. So I said, okay, I don't want to miss karate. I've got to walk. I don't walk fast. And I'm going to walk in the snow, so I've got to triple the time. So I basically woke up really early, ate breakfast, and walked to the dojo. I show up, I'm the only kid. And my sensei says, well, there's no class. I said, oh shit, So I put my jacket on. He goes, if you wait for me, I'll drive you home. I said, well, it's going to save me 3 hours, so I'll wait an hour. And he started to lift weights, and I was like, can I try? And I got bit by the iron bug. Like I said, fuck, I love this shit. And then
how old were you then?
14.
Okay.
I mean, my arms were the size of a linguine, right? I mean, if I drank a glass of V8, it looked like a thermometer. I was really skinny. And then and that's when I, about the same time, I stopped going to church because it was the winter. And then I went to the library, and that's when I got into weight training. And then I basically could read everything I could. And then I saved my money. And I remember going to the post office because you can do credit cards by phone. So I sent a money order, and I bought this magazine called Iron Man, which still exists. And then I bought all the back issues, and I started to read more and more. And then there was a famous weightlifting coach that lived in Montreal. He had 90% of the national team. So I would get on the bus, take a 2-hour ride to Montreal on Friday mornings, stay with him the whole day, stay for Saturday morning workout, ask him 2,000 questions at a workout. And then one day he told me, he goes, kid, you're really smart, but you're only going to be good if you prove it. You have to start coaching. And I started to coach a guy, which beat one of his top guys after 1 year. And then that kind of built my confidence.
So you were a young coach?
Very young.
Did you ever want to become a bodybuilder?
No.
Become an Olympian?
Olympian, yes, but...
why not bodybuilder?
I mean, I admire guys who put that much work, but it's not something that... I would have preferred to be like a famous weightlifter than a bodybuilder, but...
you enjoy the performance more than the aesthetics?
Correct.